What if Earth's atmosphere was pure oxygen? What if lighting a single match could burn down your entire neighborhood? What if a walk in the woods turned into a fiery death trap even after it rained? And what if you were constantly breathing so much oxygen that it slowly poisoned you from the inside out? This isn't a science fiction nightmare. It's a real-world scenario, one that could happen if Earth's atmosphere were made of pure oxygen. We take our air for granted. Every breath you take is mostly nitrogen, with just a touch over 20% oxygen. But what would happen if that number jumped to 100%? At first, it might sound like a dream. Better health, more energy, sharper focus. But don't be fooled. From explosive wildfires to aging 50 years overnight, a world with pure oxygen would be nothing short of apocalyptic. Welcome to What If 1688. And today, we're diving deep into one of the most dangerous questions we've ever asked. What if Earth's atmosphere was pure oxygen? Earth's current atmosphere is a careful chemical balance, about 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and small traces of carbon dioxide, argon, and other gases. This balance keeps us alive, our climate stable, and our world from spontaneously combusting. But what if that balance were broken? What if, overnight, nitrogen vanished and oxygen made up 100% of what we breathe? In theory, more oxygen seems like a good thing. After all, oxygen is vital to human life. There are oxygen bars across the world that advertise pure oxygen as a cure-all, clearer thinking, more energy, even hangover relief. But these benefits come from short bursts of oxygen, not full-time exposure. In reality, pure oxygen is extremely dangerous. Not only does it support combustion far more readily than our current atmosphere, it fuels it like gasoline. Even materials that wouldn't normally burn, like wet leaves or clothing, would ignite with ease. A single static spark or overheated wire could reduce an entire building to ashes in seconds. In a world like this, forget about candles, cooking stoves, or even electronics. Anything that generates heat could be a ticking time bomb. Wildfires wouldn't need droughts to start. Cities could be consumed in a flash. Fire departments wouldn't stand a chance. Fire prevention wouldn't just be a safety measure, it would become the most critical form of global survival. And fire isn't your only concern. Breathing pure oxygen over extended periods causes oxygen toxicity. Your lungs, not built to handle it, would begin to swell. Breathing would become painful. You'd feel dizzy, confused, and your vision could blur. Eventually, free radicals, unstable molecules generated by oxygen overload, would begin to attack your DNA, leading to cell death, organ failure, and accelerated aging. Yes, you'd actually look older. Wrinkles, gray hair, and weakened muscles would set in prematurely. Diseases like Alzheimer's and certain cancers would become more common, not less. Your body would be rusting from the inside out. And it's not just humans. Plants would suffer too. Without nitrogen in the air, the nitrogen cycle collapses. Crops would struggle to grow. Fertilizers wouldn't work the same way. The entire food chain would destabilize. So while more oxygen might sound like a supercharged world of vitality and health, the truth is terrifying. Everything around you would burn, your body would decay faster, and nature itself would struggle to survive. But that's just the beginning. You breathe in. Oxygen flows into your lungs, into your bloodstream, into every living cell. It's essential, it's life. But what if that oxygen was all you breathed? At first, you might feel amazing. Sharper thoughts, more energy, a sudden clarity like you've just woken up from a long fog. Oxygen bars, where you inhale up to 95% oxygen for a few minutes, promise everything from hangover cures to focus boosts. So more oxygen must be better, right? Wrong. The truth is, breathing 100% pure oxygen for extended periods would be catastrophic for your body. Let's start with your lungs. Our respiratory system is evolved to process air made of just over 21% oxygen, balanced mostly by inert nitrogen. In an atmosphere of pure oxygen, every breath you take would flood your lungs with reactive oxygen molecules. That doesn't just give you more energy, it overwhelms your tissues. The result? Your lungs begin to fill with fluid, a condition called pulmonary edema. Your alveoli, the tiny air sacs responsible for gas exchange, become inflamed. Breathing becomes painful. You feel tightness in your chest. Dizziness creeps in. And that's just the start. Inside your cells, oxygen begins to break down into free radicals, unstable atoms that destroy DNA, proteins, and membranes. This oxidative stress accelerates aging, causes wrinkles, and increases your risk of cancer, Alzheimer's, and cardiovascular disease. If that wasn't bad enough, your central nervous system starts to fail. Exposure to high concentrations of oxygen can trigger nausea, muscle twitching, vision disturbances, and in extreme cases, seizures. Deep-sea divers using pure oxygen tanks have long known the dangers of oxygen toxicity. Now imagine living your entire life in that state. Even your brain can't escape. Too much oxygen interferes with the delicate balance of neurotransmitters. Mood swings intensify, anxiety spikes, depression sets in, you sleep poorly, you age faster. Your body is slowly turning against itself, one breath at a time. Over time, long-term exposure to pure oxygen would damage not just the body, but the mind. You'd be more irritable, less able to concentrate, and increasingly detached from reality. Oxygen, once the giver of life, becomes a silent executioner. Could humans survive in such a world? Only through radical adaptation. Perhaps through genetic modification, or by wearing oxygen-dampening respirators 24/7. But even then, the environmental stress and health risks would be enormous, especially in lower-income countries with limited access to protective gear or medical care. In short, a pure oxygen atmosphere might sound like a performance booster, but in reality, it would become a slow, inescapable poison for every human on Earth. Let's take a walk in the woods. It just rained last night. The leaves are still wet. The air smells fresh. You strike a match to light a small campfire. Boom! The trees around you explode into flames. Not just burn, but detonate. Even the soil itself catches fire. In a world filled with 100% oxygen, the very idea of safe fire no longer exists. Oxygen doesn't burn on its own, but it's the fuel every fire craves. The more oxygen available, the more violently and rapidly combustion occurs. In our current atmosphere, a fire might take minutes to spread. In a pure oxygen atmosphere, it would take seconds. A single lightning strike in a forest? Instant wildfire. A car crash? Massive explosion. Even static electricity could ignite your clothing if you're not careful. Entire ecosystems would be erased in moments. Forests, grasslands, even oceanside vegetation would be highly combustible. Firefighters wouldn't stand a chance. Smoke would blanket the skies, and with so many things burning constantly, carbon levels would rise to catastrophic levels. But while the trees are dying, something else is thriving. Welcome to the age of the insects. 300 million years ago, during the Carboniferous period, oxygen levels on Earth rose to about 35%, and the insects of that era grew to terrifying sizes. Dragonflies with wingspans over 70 centimeters 28 inches, millipedes the size of alligators, cockroaches as long as your forearm. Now imagine doubling that oxygen level. Insects don't have lungs. They breathe through tracheal tubes, small internal passages that diffuse oxygen directly into their tissues. The more oxygen in the air, the more efficient that system becomes. In a world of pure oxygen, insect biology would go haywire. Ants the size of rats, wasps as long as your arm, spiders with legs that could wrap around your head. Predator or not, insects would dominate the food chain, not because they're smarter, but because they scale better in high oxygen environments. Their internal systems would support larger muscles, faster reflexes, and more aggressive behavior. Even if humanity tried to hide in underground shelters or oxygen-regulated cities, insect invasions would be a constant threat. And unlike mammals, insects can survive in harsher environments, breed faster, and evolve rapidly. With more oxygen, their reproductive cycles could double, creating literal swarms in weeks. But it's not just insects. Microbial life would also change. Fungi, bacteria, and molds that thrive on oxygen would become hyperactive. Wood rot would happen in hours instead of weeks. Food spoilage would be nearly instant. Disease-causing bacteria would mutate faster, especially those that rely on oxidative processes, making infections harder to treat and more deadly. Meanwhile, large mammals would struggle. Fires would destroy natural habitats. The high oxygen content would age them prematurely. Their lung systems, not built for this environment, would deteriorate faster. Over time, only a few oxygen-tolerant species would survive, and evolution would take a radical new turn. Even plants, which give us oxygen in the first place, would suffer. Paradoxically, many plants need a balance of carbon dioxide and oxygen. In pure oxygen conditions, photosynthesis would become inefficient or even toxic for some species. Trees would die from oxidative stress, and new plant life would evolve in bizarre ways, low to the ground, with thicker cell walls to resist fires and oxygen damage. Global biodiversity would collapse, and then mutate into something alien. The Earth, once full of life, would become a planet of fast-burning forests, monstrous bugs, and microbial predators, where fire is more common than water, and every breath is a risk. Imagine walking into your home and knowing that every object around you, your furniture, walls, even your clothing, could burst into flames with the slightest spark. Welcome to the nightmare of engineering in a world of pure oxygen. Most of the materials we use today, plastics, rubbers, fabrics, metals, are rated safe and functional under current atmospheric conditions, where oxygen makes up about 21% of the air. But when the air contains 100% oxygen, the flammability of almost every material skyrockets. Let's start with your house. That cozy wooden frame? A death trap. In pure oxygen, even treated lumber, fire-retardant drywall, and household insulation become dangerously combustible. A candle left unattended wouldn't just cause a fire, it would vaporize entire rooms in seconds. But it gets worse. Even materials we consider non-flammable under normal conditions, like aluminum, stainless steel, and even glass-reinforced composites, can burn or melt when exposed to intense oxygen-rich environments and high temperatures. The heat generated by even a small ignition source is exponentially more intense in an all-oxygen atmosphere. Our cities, packed with skyscrapers and transit systems, would become giant powder kegs. Every spark from an elevator motor, faulty electrical wire, or overheated device could trigger a chain reaction of explosions. The concrete jungles we live in would become blazing infernos. In response, engineering would have to adapt drastically. We'd need to redesign every material, not just for durability or cost, but for extreme oxygen stability. Fireproof coatings would be mandatory. Buildings might be sealed in vacuum layers or wrapped in oxygen-neutralizing compounds. Synthetic, oxygen-resistant materials would become as valuable as gold. Transportation would also be transformed. Internal combustion engines? Gone. The mix of fuel and oxygen in cars, planes, and ships would be far too volatile. One misfire could obliterate an entire neighborhood. Electric vehicles might seem like a solution, but even batteries can explode under certain oxygen-rich failures. Plus, the wiring and casings of those vehicles, made of polymers and metals, would need complete re-engineering. Mass transit would likely move underground or underwater, where oxygen levels can be artificially regulated. Above ground, personal transportation might rely on ceramic-based exosuits, both as vehicles and protective armor. And what about your electronics? Well, electronics don't like heat, and in a 100% oxygen atmosphere, heat is everywhere. Your phone could overheat just by running an app for too long. Your laptop might combust when plugged into the wall. That TV binge session? It could end in an inferno. Every microchip, transistor, and circuit board would have to be sealed in oxygen-proof housing. Cooling systems would be heavily overhauled to prevent temperature spikes. In fact, most data centers and server farms would need to be moved off-planet or deep below the Earth's surface. Even satellites and spacecraft would require redesign. Currently, many spacecraft use pure oxygen environments, but only in low pressure and under extreme monitoring. If Earth's atmosphere became 100% oxygen at standard pressure, the risk of satellite launches, landings, and engine ignitions would multiply exponentially. Welding, soldering, metal fabrication, these professions would become incredibly dangerous, or even impossible. Fire departments wouldn't just carry hoses, they'd need robotic units, inert gas bombs, and oxygen scrubbers to fight the blazes. Ultimately, everyday life would have to be wrapped in technological armor, from your home to your clothing. Your wardrobe? Likely made of ceramic fibers or temperature-resistant compounds that can't ignite. Your shoes? Designed to ground electrical charges so a spark doesn't kill you. Your home appliances, your stove, microwave, coffee maker, would require airtight compartments and double safety protocols. Even cooking would become dangerous. Frying an egg could become an exercise in explosive risk. Living in such a world would transform humanity into a society of caution, containment, and constant fire prevention. A sneeze of static, a slipped wire, a birthday candle. In a world of 100% oxygen, the smallest accidents could become your last. In a world where every breath fuels a fire and every material wants to burn, humanity would face its most dramatic challenge yet, reinventing life itself. Because in this new world, oxygen is no longer the gas of life. It's the spark of extinction. Let's start with the body. While humans evolved to breathe a mix of roughly 21% oxygen, constant exposure to 100% oxygen would be biologically unsustainable. Within hours or days, cells in your body would begin to break down due to oxidative stress. Free radicals, those unstable oxygen-related molecules, would ravage DNA, tear through cell membranes, and cause widespread inflammation. The result? Faster aging, neurological disorders, early onset cancer, blindness, and potentially fatal damage to the lungs and brain. Even the strongest immune systems wouldn't stand a chance. But what if, somehow, we adapted? Over thousands of years, evolutionary pressure might favor humans with thicker lung linings, slower metabolisms, and naturally produced antioxidants. Skin might darken or even become semi-metallic to resist oxygen-induced cellular damage. We'd likely develop redundant organs, backup systems, and internal regulators to manage constant chemical stress. Our eyes, constantly bombarded by oxygen-rich air, could evolve transparent membranes or multiple eyelids. Hair might become fire-resistant or vanish completely, but these adaptations would take centuries or millennia, assuming humanity survived long enough. In the short term, we'd rely heavily on technology, oxygen filters in our homes, antioxidant-infused diets, daily medication to regulate internal oxidation, protective gear just to step outside. And even then, survival wouldn't be guaranteed. Now zoom out. The planet itself is changing. The ozone layer, Earth's natural sunscreen, is largely composed of oxygen. But in a 100% oxygen environment, that balance could destabilize. UV radiation from the sun would penetrate deeper into the atmosphere, altering plant life and increasing skin cancer rates. Global climate systems would warp. Forests would shrink or vanish, replaced by smaller, fire-adapted shrubs. Grasslands would turn to ash fields, barren and windswept. Rain would become acidic, as nitrogen is no longer present to buffer oxygen reactions in the atmosphere. Oceans? With oxygen saturating the atmosphere, surface waters would become hyperoxic, potentially poisoning marine life adapted to stable conditions. Coral reefs would bleach and die. Fish populations would collapse. Algae blooms, feeding on oxygen and sunlight, could create vast, choking mats that suffocate the seas. Even Earth's geological cycles would slow. Without nitrogen to balance the air, the planet's surface pressure would change. Volcanic activity might either spike or fall, depending on how the crust responds to the new chemistry. Now ask yourself, how would society function? We would no longer build for growth, but for containment. Cities might be built underground, away from the volatile atmosphere. Agriculture would move into sealed biodomes where oxygen levels are tightly controlled. Factories would be automated, manned by fireproof drones. Religion, politics, and philosophy would shift dramatically. Fire, once sacred, would become feared. Air itself would be viewed as a dangerous deity, unpredictable and untamed. Children would grow up never lighting a candle, never roasting marshmallows, never knowing the open flame. Instead, they'd learn about combustion like we learn about black holes, with awe and terror. And yet, humanity might persist. Because we adapt. We always have. Perhaps we would become a new species entirely, no longer Homo sapiens, but something more, a fireproof, oxygen-regulated version of our former selves. Our lungs and skin armored, our cities domed, our planet forever changed, all because the very thing that once gave us life, oxygen, became the greatest threat to our survival. So, what started as a harmless thought, what if we had more oxygen? Oisi, the has turned into a terrifying alternate reality. Instead of becoming superhuman, we'd become fragile, flammable shadows of ourselves. Our buildings would burn, our machines would explode, our cities would vanish in pillars of fire, and the very air we breathe, the gift of life, would become a ticking bomb. Every system on Earth, from your lungs to the oceans, from global ecosystems to human civilization, would collapse or mutate under the pressure of an all-oxygen atmosphere. In this world, survival wouldn't just be about strength or intelligence. It would be about control. Control over oxygen, over fire, over evolution itself. We'd have to redesign everything, from our bodies to our buildings, just to stay alive. And yet, despite the horror, there's something strangely beautiful about the idea that the smallest change, just a little extra oxygen, could rewrite the entire story of life on Earth. So now, it's over to you. What do you think would be the biggest challenge in a world full of oxygen? Would humanity survive, or would we burn out before we could evolve? Leave your thoughts in the comments. We're reading all of them. And if this video lit a spark in your mind, share it with someone curious. Subscribe for more mind-bending what-ifs. Because sometimes, the most ordinary things, like air, hold the most extraordinary dangers. Thanks for watching, and breathe easy. For now.